agreed to run this session with us today so that we could all think about the law, think about rights and what we can do to make sure that the people we know or ourselves have the same access to their human rights as everybody else and the things they should have. So I've seen the presentation and it looks fantastic. So I think it's going to be a really interesting session. We are going to record it. So bear that in mind. If you do kind of speak or anything, we will be recording it. But we're not going to share anything anybody says outside of here. And as Jenny says, we really need a shift of power. By don't we need a shift of power? So thank you all for coming. I'm going to introduce you now to Ailey and Carlin. Ailey's going to be doing most of the presentation. They're both from the British Institute of Human Rights. And they're going to be talking to us about how we can unlock those human rights so everybody has a good life. Ailey, are you ready to take over? Can you unmute yourself?
Yes, thank you. I will just share the screen with you. Is that good? Can everyone see the slides? Perfect. Well, hello. Thanks, Sam, for introducing us there. My name's Ailey, and I'm from the British Institute of Human Rights. And today we're going to look at human rights and how we can unlock them. So just a little bit about us first at BIHR, for those of you that have never met us before. We are an independent UK charity, and we work in sort of 4 different ways. We work with people. We try and provide people with information on human rights so they can change their own lives. We really believe that knowledge is power. We work with communities to address social justice issues using human rights. And we work with systems to increase the accountability of public bodies to respect and protect human rights in everything they do every day. And the last thing we do is work in policy, sharing news of people whose rights are risked to help change policy that affects them and their families. And of course, in the past few months, we've been doing that a bit differently and being a bit more online. Usually we're in the room with people, but it's also great to be able to be online and speak to 85 people at the same time at the moment. Sam gave a really good introduction to Right to Home campaign, but that's why we're here today. 1 year ago, we saw the BBC Panorama episode about the horrible scenes of abuse in Wharton Hall. And it's been 8 years since the Winterbourne View and Transforming Care that came after it, with the central promise of people moving out of secure mental health units, but it's not yet been fulfilled, and over 2,000 adults and children with learning disabilities or autism are in secure mental health units in the UK. So that's why we're here today. We're here to give a bit of knowledge about rights that hopefully people can use in their lives every day. So how today will work? We're using Zoom, and as Sam said, there's many people here today, so the microphones are muted. If you can use the chat function, you can ask us questions throughout. I'll stop at different times for questions. We're not going to take a break because it's only an hour, but do feel free if you need to take a break. So I've introduced you to us. Now is a little bit of I would like to hear a bit of an introduction from you all. Anyone that can use the chat bar, it'd be great if you could tell me your name, where in the UK you are. I think most of you are probably in England at the moment. And something that made you happy this week. I'll give an example for myself. So my name is Ailey. Just now I'm in Scotland. I usually live in London, but I'm in Scotland at the moment, and I have to say it's not very sunny at all. It's very windy, and I think it's going to start to rain. And something that's made me happy this week is that Monday is a bank holiday, and hopefully if the weather gets a bit better, I'm going to have a barbecue. So if people could share in the chat bar, I'm not going to be able to read everyone out because there's going to be many, but if you'd like to share with me your name, whereabouts in the UK, and something that made you happy today, it'd be great. Somebody's in London having jerk chicken later, very exciting. Jodie from Sunderland. Nicola from Essex, got some great feedback and advocacy qualification, perfect. Beth is in Sheffield and loving the sunshine. Oh, Lisa's also having a barbecue tonight. Good to hear. Jenny from the Wirral, and the weather's making her feel happy. Oh, I see somebody's favourite takeaways you opened. That's excellent news. Okay, thank you so much for sharing, everyone. I think at the moment we're seeing less of people in person, so it's quite nice to share some stories of what makes us happy. Feeling a bit distant from the outside world. Gonna choose two more. Laura's living in West Yorkshire and loving the beautiful flowers. And Christine, the sun made her happy. Yeah, I think the sun is something that's making us all very happy at this moment. Thanks so much for sharing, everyone. I'm going to move on now to a bit about today and what we're going to do. So today we will learn more about understanding human rights and how this and understanding law can help people with learning disabilities and their family, and understand what human rights are and how they can help you build the independent life that you want. We'll learn a bit more about our human rights law here in the UK called the Human Rights Act, and how public services, need to respect and protect human rights at all times. And we'll look at some real life examples of human rights. This session is only an hour long, and we know that we might not be able to cover some issues that are really important to you or people in your family who you support, but we've tried to make this session as informative as possible, and hopefully we'll organise more sessions like this in the future and talk about that at the end. Today we've not actually went into a lot of detail around the changes to law because of coronavirus. I know it's something that might be affecting your lives just now, but at the end I'll share lots of our resources and information around the changes because of coronavirus. Just a little bit here about looking after yourself in this session. Today we'll talk about how human rights apply to real life, and at times these stories might make you feel a bit upset or anxious. So always feel free to take a moment and leave the session if you need to. And just to tell you at the start is we are a charity who gives information, and we can't give individual legal advice or do casework. And of course, if you're at risk of immediate harm, you should always contact the police. There's the emergency number there and non-emergency number. That's just something that we say at the start of all of our sessions. So I've already been talking a bit, so I'd like to put it back to you again in the chat bar. This is something that we always ask people at the start of our sessions, and it's always really interesting. Whenever you think about the words human rights, what does it make you think about? What's the first things that come to your head? So if you could type in the chat bar and let me know, is it a word, a feeling, a phrase, a song, a person? Let me check what some of your answers are. Freedom, just for everyone, being safe, equality, choice, safety, listening to everyone, equality, liberty, having the right to do what I want to do, protection, empowerment. These are all great things, all things that I think about as well whenever I think about human rights. Equality, justice, inclusion for all. I love the all there, it's very important. Letting everyone take part in decisions. Communication. Allowed to be and have a voice. Yeah. These are all really great examples, and these are all things that human rights are all about, actually. I'm just going to move on now. So whenever we ask people what are human rights, we often get the sort of answers that you've just given us. Things like dignity, respect, fairness, and being listened to and having a say over your own life. And these are all things that are absolutely central to human rights. These are what human rights are built upon, these ideas. But something that's really, really important about human rights is that they're not just values, they're about the law. And that's really important. And that's something that we're going to look at today. So it's not just something that is a value or an idea, but it's actually the law here in the UK. So, who has human rights? And lots of people said that human rights are for all. Exactly. Every person here in the UK has human rights. Human rights are not gifts from the government or rewards you earn. It's not something you get for doing good or being good. It's something that you have because you're human. And sometimes rights may be limited. but there's a test that public bodies have to meet, and they can never be taken completely away. And that's something that we're going to look at today. Sometimes your rights can be limited, but they can never be taken away. Everyone, because they're a human, has human rights. And every person has the same human rights. Doesn't matter about your age, your race, if you have a learning disability or not, everyone has the same human rights. And I know I wasn't going to mention coronavirus or COVID very often, but it's important to remember here that this is the same. It was the same before coronavirus, it's the same now, and it will be the same after this emergency situation. We all have human rights, and they can be limited, but they can never be taken away. So where do these human rights come from? Where does our idea of human rights in the UK come from? So, as you all know, really terrible things happened to people in World War II. And that was the starter for modern human rights in the world, really, having them set down as law. In the Second World War, we saw what happens when governments treat people as less than human, whenever governments can decide who is a person, who is a human, who is not. So after the Second World War, all the countries of the world, they came together and they said, this is never going to happen again. Never again can a government decide who is human, who has rights and who has not. And the international governments, they wrote down these sort of standards, a rule book of how states should treat people, of how governments should treat people. And this was called the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. That happened just after the Second World War. And these were standards that apply to everyone, and they cannot be taken away, only limited or restricted. And these rules are about how we as people should be treated by our government. So there's that sort of relationship there between us as individuals and the government or the state. So the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948, just after the Second World War, that was the first time that human rights had been written down as law. So the next thing that happened was the European Convention of Human Rights. And that was written in 1950 by an organisation called the Council of Europe. Sometimes we get a bit confused between the Council of Europe and the European Union, but they're two very different things. The Council of Europe is much older than the European Union. That also started after the Second World War. And although whatever's happened in the UK with Brexit and leaving the EU, we're still members of the Council of Europe. So in 1950, the European governments, they got together and they took many of the rights from the European Declaration of Human Rights and they put them into the European Convention of Human Rights. This was written in 1950 and became law in 1953. And it made lots of the rights in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights legally enforceable in Europe. So one of the sort of issues with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was what happens if you think your rights are at risk. But the European Convention of Human Rights, that was great because it had a court attached to it, the European Court of Human Rights, which is in Strasbourg in France. So if you felt as though you had a human rights claim, if your human rights were at risk, you could take your case to the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg in France. And anybody around Europe who felt their human rights were at risk could do the same thing. So what does that mean for us here in the UK? So the first of all was the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, just after the Second World War. Then a few years later, the European Convention of Human Rights, which brought in the European Court of Human Rights, which was made by the Council of Europe and not the EU. Then after that, in 1998, we had the Human Rights Act, which brought the rights from the European Convention of Human Rights and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. They made them law here to us in the UK. And this, the Human Rights Act, that's what we're going to look at today. And just one more thing about coronavirus is that no matter what is happening in our country today with coronavirus, the European Convention of Human Rights and the Human Rights Act are still law. They have not been changed. It's also not been changed by us leaving the European Union. Two very different things. So the Human Rights Act and the European Convention of Human Rights are both still law for us here in the UK. So the Human Rights Act, that's the main way that our human rights are protected in the UK. I'm going to come back to that in a moment, but I just wanted to mention a little bit about independent living and human rights. Many of you have probably heard of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities. In Article 19 of that convention, that's an international convention, which all the governments have decided at the UN, a bit like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The Article 19 of that says that living independently is about living independently and being included in the community. It says that states should recognise with the equal rights of all persons with disabilities to live in the community with choices equal to others, and shall take effective and appropriate measures to facilitate full enjoyment by people with disabilities of this right and their full inclusion and participation in the community. So that's all about people with disabilities being supported to live in the community. So our Human Rights Act, which is the law here in the UK, that sort of anchors that idea. It takes it from the international law. And if we look at the two rights that we're going to look at today, the right to respect for private life and family life, that sort of anchors that idea of independent living in UK law. Human rights and the Human Rights Act can be used by all of us to create change in our lives, in the lives of the people that we support, and they can help you build and keep the independent life you want. I'm going to quickly share the story of Gemma to sort of as an example of this. So this is Gemma. She's in her late 30s and has a learning disability. She'd previously been living with her mum, but her mum had passed away sadly. The local authority, the council, then paid for Gemma to be placed in a local care home. The home was really inappropriate for Gemma as it was a home for older people and it didn't provide the kind of care or support she needed. The care home also had a locked door policy to prevent people with dementia from leaving it. This meant that Gemma wasn't able to come and go freely from the home as she had previously been able to do whenever she was living with her mum. Gemma, she was also contributing financially each week for activities, but she was told by the staff that she couldn't even participate in these activities because they were not age appropriate for her. As you can imagine, Gemma was really upset by this, and she was really living in a place that wasn't right for her, it was really inappropriate for her. And she was especially sad as it just happened after her mum died, and she wasn't allowed to come and go from the home as she wanted. So Gemma wanted to challenge this placement, and she talked to her local Health Watch team, and she used the rights that we're going to talk about today, the right to private life and the right to be free from discrimination. And then the Health Watch, after listening to this, they decided to arrange a series of visits to the care communities, to the care home, and they talked to staff and about the people living there in the home, about their human rights, and then they wrote a report on this. And amongst the findings, the report uncovered that Gemma was living in an inappropriate setting, and as a result, the local authority now support Gemma to live independently in their own flat, where she's much happier. Now, I don't want to say that all the time human rights are a magic wand that are going to completely change everything, but they can be used as a sort of tool to facilitate this, to have discussions and create change in people's lives. And that's what we're going to look at today. And as somebody's mentioned quite rightly on the chat, there's a different right, the right to liberty as well, involved in that story, but we're just going to look at two rights today. So, back to the Human Rights Act. I said that the Human Rights Act is the main way our rights are protected in the UK. So in 1998, we brought human rights, as we say, even closer to home with our Human Rights Act. If you think about that arrow, gradually human rights were moving closer and closer to us. First it was worldwide, then Europe, then UK. And how does this Human Rights Act work? Well, it works in three ways. Firstly, the Human Rights Act puts a legal duty on public authorities and the public officials who work in them to respect and protect human rights across all their actions, decisions, policies and services. So in everything they do, really, they should respect and protect human rights. The second bit is that all other laws should be applied in a way which respects your human rights as far as possible. And then lastly, if 1 and 2 are not complied with, people can now bring human rights cases to the UK courts. So I said a good thing about the European Convention on Human Rights was that we had a court in France, in Strasbourg, where we could bring our human rights issues. But as you can imagine, the Council of Europe has millions of people living there. There was very long waiting lists to get to the court, and it was actually physically very difficult for many people to get to Strasbourg in France. So now, if we have a human rights issue, we don't need to raise it. We don't need to go to France to raise it. We can raise it here in the UK. And this has not changed. Regardless of what's going on in our country with coronavirus or anything else, the Human Rights Act still works in 3 main ways. So firstly, the legal duty. I said that all public officials and those carrying out a public function must ensure human rights are respected, protected and fulfilled. So back to yous now. Who are public officials? What sort of jobs would you think that a public official might have? Some of these pictures down here are going to give you an idea. Social worker, Can says. Yep, exactly. Police. Doctor. Police. Local council. Local authority. Yep. Ambulance services. Teachers. Yes, all of these are really good examples of people that are public officials. CCG commissioners, another great one. Yep. So, public officials are people like NHS staff, local authority staff, such as social services, social workers, as people said, housing officers, and so on. And then there's police, prison staff, and courts and tribunals. And then there was another law in 2014, and that brought in this, it sort of clarified who has a legal duty under the Human Rights Act, who is a public official. And it said, it was about care, and it said if a service is providing care that is paid for, or even partially paid for, or arranged by a local authority, it will be bound by the Human Rights Act. So if we're thinking about, does my provider of care and support, for example, do they have a legal duty? We look back and think, has the care been paid for, even a little bit paid for, or arranged by a local authority? Then the care provider will be bound by the Human Rights Act. They will have a legal duty by the Human Rights Act. Okay. So what does this mean? What does legal duty on public officials and services mean? So it's a 3-part right. The first part is that public officials and the services that they work for must respect people's human rights. So this means that they shouldn't do anything to sort of actively breach them. The second part is to protect people's human rights. They must take positive action to prevent harm. And this, we sometimes hear this referred to as safeguarding. So this is about taking positive action if somebody's rights are at risk to prevent that person from harm. And the last bit, which is really important, is fulfill people's human rights. To have processes and investigate when things have gone wrong. So if something's gone wrong, there's been an issue with your human rights, then there's a legal duty for the service and people who work for that service to sort of look into what went wrong and try and stop it from happening again. So there's that 3-part right there, to respect, protect, and fulfill human rights. And this is really important for us, this human rights legal duty, because it actually means that we, as people accessing services, or as individuals whenever we're interacting with services, is that we can do these 3 things. We can speak up, because we all have human rights, which the law says should be respected and protected. It's not about just a feeling or a think that should happen, but it's about, this is the law. We have human rights and this is the law, and they should be respected and protected. Also allows us to talk to services about whether they're meeting their legal duty to respect and protect people's human rights. And it's not about causing a fight or having an argument, but it's about speaking together with someone and saying, these are human rights and it's your legal duty to respect and protect them. And human rights can be really good for that. It sort of takes away the sort of argument side of it, and it creates a kind of a conversation that can be had. It can also work with services to find better solutions without the need to go to court or use a lawyer. I think quite often we hear people talk about human rights about something that's happened in court, but we can actually use them in our everyday lives and have better solutions without needing to use a lawyer or go to court. So the second part of how the Human Rights Act works is that it's what we call a foundation law. So if we see that big triangle there, at the bottom is the Human Rights Act. Second is some other law, any other laws of the UK, such as the Mental Health Act or Mental Capacity Act. Also there you could put the Coronavirus Act, so all the other UK laws. On top of that we have Code of Practice, that's things like guidance, the sort of things that tell services how they should do their jobs. And then we have practice, so how people actually do their jobs in everyday lives. Because the Human Rights Act is at the bottom here, that means that throughout all the other different stages in law, guidance and everyday practice, human rights should be respected, protected and fulfilled. All other laws should respect your human rights, and public officials and organisations should apply any of their other laws, practice or guidance in a way that protects people's human rights. And of course this also applies now. Even with the new laws and practice and guidance that we're seeing because of coronavirus, still must protect and respect human rights whenever any changes are made because of that. And the third bit, which I mentioned a bit before, is that you can now bring a human rights case to a UK court. Before, as I said, before we had the Human Rights Act, we would have to go to the European Court of Human Rights, which is in Strasbourg in France, to get help. And that was far away and took years to get your case heard. So the Human Rights Act brought these rights closer to home, which meant you could now ask your local court or tribunal to help you with your rights. But what we want to talk to you really today about is about how to use your rights before you get to court. Just going to pause for questions very quickly. If anyone has any questions, feel free to share in the chat. I'm going to take a wee look at the chat and see what's there. I think that my colleague Carolyn is actually answering quite a lot of the questions. Perfect. If anybody has a question about anything that I've just said, share with me now. If not, I'm going to move on. Okay, I think Carolyn's dealing with most of them just now. Carolyn's my colleague at BIHR. Okay, I'm going to move on at the moment and come back to another question for you all. How many rights are in the Human Rights Act, do you think? Does anyone know how many rights there are, and can you name any rights? It doesn't have to be perfect wording for the right, but what rights do you think there are, and how many rights do you think there are in the Human Rights Act? People are saying right to family life, right to life, right to family, choice, privacy, freedom of expression. Yeah, these are all great. Somebody says 200 rights. Do we have any more guesses than 200? 12? 212, quite a big difference there. 115, 18. All very good guesses. 230. It's really interesting. Very often in these sessions, we either get that there's one or two rights or there's hundreds. Karen said 16. And Karen is correct. There's 16 rights in the Human Rights Act. And I think the reason why some people say 2 and some people say hundreds, is inside these rights, there's actually quite different sort of ideas of things that you might not necessarily think that are in your rights. So one of the rights that we're going to look at today, which is the right to respect for private, family life, home and correspondence, that's actually a right that includes many of different things that you think that you might have human rights about. So there's 16 rights there, and all of them, of course, very relevant to your life. But today we're going to look at 2 key rights. We're going to look at the right to respect for private and family life, home and correspondence, and we're going to look at the right not to be discriminated against in relation to any of the human rights listed here. And that's a special right, because that right about not to be discriminated against, it doesn't exist by itself. It has to be connected onto one of your other human rights, one of these other 15 human rights. Now, I know that you're probably going to want lots of information about all the different rights, but we've picked out these 2 to look at today, and at the end I will share with you lots of different resources where you can find out about all your other human rights, because they're all, of course, very important to your life. So, I said that some human rights can be restricted and some cannot. So we divide our human rights, those 16 human rights, into these 2 sort of different types of rights. One is called absolute rights. That means it can never be restricted. These rights can never be interfered with. And this is sort of the framework about how we look at human rights, because it means that we can change or challenge decisions or policies in a way to make them more rights respecting. And it's really helpful to sort of use this framework of absolute rights and non-absolute rights to discuss decisions about your care and your support. And despite any changes around the Coronavirus Act or anything like that, your human rights must be respected, and this is still a way that we can look at any decision about our care or about our support or about our lives that affect our human rights. So I said that some rights are absolute rights, and that's really important because they can never lawfully be restricted. And any time that one of your absolute rights are at risk, that can be challenged and it needs to be dealt with urgently. Now, most of the rights are non-absolute, and there's a 3-stage test. If any sort of decision is involving one of your non-absolute rights, there's a 3-stage test to look at. That's, is it lawful, legitimate, and proportionate? And we're going to look at what each of these 3 steps mean. So first is lawful. Is there a law which allows public officials to take that action? The second step is it legitimate? This means, is there a good reason for doing that? And usually is that to protect you or others from harm, or public safety, or protecting the rights of other people. We really say, is it about protecting you or others from harm? The third one, and this is where the most discussions can be had, I guess, is this idea of proportionality. Maybe you hear this quite a lot. Is it proportionate? Public officials, like health and care workers, they must have thought about all the other things they can do, and there must be no other way to protect you or other people. So we say it's the least restrictive. Is there any other way that this decision could be made, or any other sort of way things could be done that wasn't such a big restriction of your rights? It should always be the sort of least restrictive, the least impact in your rights. And that's where we can have the most discussion around this idea of proportionality. Is there a way that this decision could be made? Is there a way that this situation can be changed so it's less of an interference with my rights? And we're going to look at that. We're going to go through some real life stories and sort of look at that. So hopefully that'll be a bit clear in a second. So first of all, we're going to look at the right to respect for private and family life, home and correspondence. That's always a bit of a mouthful to get out. And I think this right here is why sometimes people think there's 200 rights or 300 rights or 900 rights. It's a really big right that includes lots of different things. Private life, family life, home and correspondence. We're going to go through each of these 4 parts in turn. First is your right to private life. This includes your private information and keeping that confidential. It also includes ideas about you having control over your own body and life. You being asked about decisions about your care and treatment, for example, including where you live. This thing about having control and being asked, this is sometimes called autonomy, and it includes agreeing or consenting to medical treatment. It also includes your well-being, so your physical and mental health, and it means being free from abuse and neglect. Private life, including private life, is also you being part of your community, however you see your community, and being able to be part of that if you want to. Now, I'm going to show you a little video to sort of illustrate this idea of private life. And this video is about Tim and Sylvia. Now, Tim and Sylvia, they both have a learning disability and they have a small child. And social services have decided that they would move them to a residential unit to monitor how they're doing looking after their baby. And in this residential unit, there were CCTV cameras in every single room, including their bedroom. So Tim and Sylvia thought this was an issue to do with their human rights, to do with their right to private life. And in this video, this is going to be a wee video I'm going to show you. You're going to see some people from Liverpool MenCap who we made a video with. And they're going to be acting out Tom and Sylvia's story and talking about what the right to private life means to them. You'll also see my colleague Carolyn from BIHR, who is in the chat answering some of your questions at the moment. Here's your video.
No, what's that there?
The cameras are everywhere.
Yeah, they are. They're in the bathroom, shower, bedroom, everywhere. It's annoying. It's wrecking our private life.
So all we have to do is ring the social services and see what they help us.
What can I help you with, please?
But these cameras are in the bedroom, the bathroom, and the living room, and the kitchen, and we've got no privacy.
We want our own private life. We have. They're in the bathroom, shower, bedroom, everywhere. It's annoying. It's wrecking our private life.
So all we have to do is ring the social services and see what they help us.
What can I help you with, please?
But these cameras are in the bedroom, the bathroom, and the living room, and the kitchen, and we've got no privacy.
We want our own private life. We have the right for privacy.
The only thing I can do is to take the cameras down off a night time, and that's it. How does that sound?
In this case, social services decided that yes, you're right, this is disproportionate, so they agreed to turn the cameras off at night to give Tim and Sylvia a bit more privacy.
Sylvia was upset because the cameras, they're on all the time, 24/7, no peace, no quietly, can't get no privacy anywhere.
The right is important to privacy about their lives and being in their house, whether they don't have cameras, because it's got to give them respect without no cameras being in there off a night time so they're not getting watched.
So you go, that was just a wee video to illustrate the right to privacy and that idea about proportionality, which I'm going to go back to in a second. So the second part of the right to private life, family life, home and correspondence is family life. And this right protects things like making friends or finding a partner and having a family yourselves. Also includes keeping in touch with your own family if you're separated. This is another story here. This is a real life story. This is Stephen and Mark Neary. You might have heard their story already. Stephen and his dad, Mark. And Stephen is a young man with a learning disability, and he lived at home with his dad. When his dad was ill, Stephen went for a short break at the local authority support unit. But in the end, that local authority kept Stephen there for over a year. Both him and his dad didn't want this. The local authority wanted Stephen to stay in a care home miles away from his dad. Stephen and his dad took a human rights case to the courts to challenge this. The court decided that the local authority hadn't protected Stephen and his dad's right to family life. as separating Stephen and Mark had a really big impact on their life as a family. It was also decided that Stephen's right to liberty had been breached. That's another right that somebody had mentioned before, but it's not one that we're looking at in any depth today. It was also decided that there was an impact on Stephen's and Mark's private and family life because they weren't asked about what they wanted, and their views on the situation were not taken into account. Another part of this right is the right to home, and this is not a right to housing, but a respect to the right for the home that you already have. And some examples of this include living in a place where you call home, and this is a place where you've lived for a while and have friends there, and it could include things, it doesn't have to be a physical house, it could include things like a care home or a hospital ward. The right to home also protects being removed from somewhere you live to receive health or care when you've been promised it's your home for life. However, this right is about the enjoyment of your current home. Sometimes people want to use this part of the right, of this right to family life, private life, home and correspondence. They want to use this part of the right when they're having discussions about changing the place they live. It's got the word home in it, so you think it's the best one to use. So it's quite often people want to use this whenever they're talking about changing the place they live or moving back home to stay with family members, for example. But in our experience in looking at these cases, it's not really the best argument if you want to change where you live. And the other parts of the right, like private and family life, are more successful. This is more about the home that you have at the moment and not being removed from that. The last part is correspondence, and that's about being able to keep in touch with people, including by letter or email or text, and keeping correspondence private. So that's things like keeping letters and emails private as well. Sometimes if you're detained, people providing your care may be able to check or keep your correspondence. That's because of the Mental Health Act. But in general, your correspondence should be private. Any questions just now on Article 8 on the right to private life, family life, home and correspondence? Again, I think Carolyn has got them all, so I'm just going to move on quickly so we can cover everything we want to cover today. Okay. So, the second right I wanted to look at is the right to be free from discrimination. As I said, this is a special right. It's not a standalone right. It must be connected to one of the other rights in the Human Rights Act. So, for example, in this case, are you being discriminated against in your right to private life, for example? So if a doctor makes a decision about not treating your physical health problem, for example, because you have a learning disability, your right to well-being would be sort of engaged there. That would be about your right to well-being under the right to private, family life, home and correspondence. And then you can sort of connect that with a non-discrimination argument whenever you're talking to your doctor. So the right to be free from discrimination, that includes if you're being treated less favourably, so less well, than other people in the same situation because of your learning disability. And it also includes failing to treat you differently when you are in a very different situation to others, for example, because of your learning disability. Also includes applying rules to you that have a worse impact on you because of your learning disability. So sometimes you may not be treated differently, but that's not discrimination, and there might be a good reason for it. For example, if a local authority is running a service for people living with learning disabilities, this would be treating them differently because of their disability. But the good reason is because that service is needed by people with learning disabilities. This is a little sort of illustration, a little picture that shows you what non-discrimination looks like. So if you imagine in the first picture, discrimination there. People with different situations in their lives cannot get the same thing because of discrimination. All those people there are trying to see that baseball game, but they can't because of some form of discrimination, which affects different people in different ways. The second one shows that sometimes discrimination is failing to treat you differently when you're a very different example. So if you think about in the first one, everyone's got a box, but that doesn't matter for the person on the right. Some people might need to be treated differently to be able to access the same thing. And then the last picture there, that shows that sometimes a law or a policy or the way that practice is being done is in itself discriminatory, and it needs to be looked at or removed or changed so that everyone can access the thing that they're trying to access. So now to sort of tell you about Free from Discrimination, I'm going to tell you the story of Abigail. This is Abigail here. She's in her 50s and she has Down syndrome. She lives with her parents at home and she has a busy social life. She enjoys spending time with her siblings and their children. She has no underlying physical health issues, but she was admitted to hospital with breathing difficulties. And then when Peter, her nurse, looks at her notes, he sees that she has a DNR, a Do Not Resuscitate order placed on them. When Peter speaks to Abigail's sister on the phone later, she tells him that neither Abigail nor her family were ever asked about the DNR order. They never said that that was okay. That was not something that Abigail or her family wanted. Now, we've heard, sadly, a lot more stories like this recently, but this is never lawful in times, even in these times of coronavirus. Blanket policies, such as this one is, if they're putting DNR orders on everybody with a learning disability, for example, that's never lawful. It's a sort of moral judgment about quality of a life and not a medical decision based on an individual's treatment and prognosis. So they didn't think about how healthy Abigail is, her sort of how treatment will affect her. And then in that case, this would be discrimination. The sort of main right here, of course, is the right to life, being interfered with in a sort of discriminatory way. But also here, she's not been asked about how she feels. And that's sort of one of the rights that we're looking at today around private life and family life, that idea to being involved in decision making. So there you can see Article 2, right to life, and private and family life being combined with the right to be free from discrimination. So that decision there could be challenged because it seems to be discriminatory sort of interference with Abigail's rights to life and private and family life. Just going to check for questions. Sorry, the chat bar went missing there. I'm just going to move on. I think that Carolyn is dealing with the questions and I want to cover all the stuff that I can because we've only got a few minutes left. So let's put all of what we've just learned into practice. And we're going to do this with the story of John. This is John here. He's a young man with a learning disability. He's been in an ATU for some time, but the unit, it never felt like home for John. He missed his family and his friends and his dog. And because of this, he's become really anxious and upset. At John's last care and treatment review, it was decided that he should be supported to live in the ATU, to leave the ATU, and to live in the community. So it was decided that he should be supported to leave the ATU and live in the community. However, John and his family, they were told that because of coronavirus, there were staff shortages. There wasn't enough staff to be able to support him, to give him the support that he needed to leave the ATU and live in the community. He was told that he would have to stay in the ATU until there was more staff available. John was understandably really upset about this, and him and his family got in touch with an independent advocate. This independent advocate knew about human rights. So we're going to imagine that we're either John's advocate or himself or his friend, family or friend who is supporting him. And we've just had this training about human rights, right? We know about human rights and what they mean. And we know that public officials have a duty to protect, respect and fulfil our human rights. So we'll go through this 3-stage test and we'll look at this decision that's been made about John for him to remain in the ATU. And we think first, is it lawful? Is there a law which allows public officials to take that action? Is it legitimate? Has there been a good reason for this? And is it proportionate? Is there a thing that they could have done which is less restrictive on John's rights? So let's do this bit by bit. First, what I'd be asking if I was talking to John about this was I would ask, what law is this decision being made under? Was John involved in this decision? Is this the least restrictive option? So we have to look at all of these things when we're thinking about lawful, and we can also ask the public officials making that decision these questions. What law was this made under, for example? Second one is legitimate. So there must be a good reason. For example, public safety or protecting the rights of other people. Rights can't be restricted just because of resources, such as a lack of staffing or money. In this situation, it doesn't seem as though this is protecting John or others from harm. Actually, it looks like it's really causing John to be upset and anxious. So then we move on to the third question. Is this proportionate? So public officials must think about the other things that they could do, and then the decision should only be made when there's no other way to protect you or other people. So we ask, is this the least restrictive options? Which other steps could have been taken in this situation? What could have been done so that John isn't facing a longer time in the ATU? Does anyone have any ideas? I'm going to go to the chat bar and see what ideas we have. What could have been done in this situation that's a better solution for John if everyone took a step back and thought about how could this situation be better, rather than just John remaining in the ATU because there's not support out there? Any ideas on the chat? Respite centre is home with support. Ask him what he wants, Kieran, exactly. This is not proportionate or right, I would argue as well. Supported living. In the community, he can replicate the key aspects of his care that help him feel safe, exactly. Can he have pets in his place? That's a really good idea. So, all of these ideas are great and ones that we thought about as well. So could John's family, could they be supported? For example, could they get a direct payment to provide some of his care? Is there any way that his house could be adapted to his needs so he can be supported to live at home? And for example, is there any community organisations who could offer support? As I said before, we really understand that human rights are not always a magic wand and people's situations can be really complicated. But sort of reminding public officials about their legal duties to protect, respect and fulfil people's human rights can create real change. We do see it every day about being able to use this language of human rights can create real change. So I have another little 5 minutes. We started a wee bit later. And I'm just going to continue, but I know that that's the hour up, so if people need to leave, then please do feel free, but I think the next 5-10 minutes is really important, so I'm just going to continue with that. So, as I said, the Human Rights Act and the legal duty in it, it means that people can speak up, because we all have human rights, which the law said should be respected and protected. We can talk to services about whether they're meeting their legal duty to respect and protect human rights, and we can work with services to find better solutions without the need to go to court or use a lawyer. So, raising a human rights issue, there's sort of a 4-step process that you can do to raise a human rights issue. So what is the issue? Think about what is worrying or upsetting you. What are the human rights involved could be one of the human rights that we talked about today, but there's also many more. Second is you could have a meeting, you could organise a meeting to talk to the public official, to talk to the person that's made the decision. And if you feel worried about this, you can ask for support from family or friends, a support worker, or an independent advocate. And it's really some sort of top tips here for meeting with a public official is think about, do you need to ask them for more information? What do you want to achieve? What could be better in this situation? Can you compromise? What's the sort of minimum change you would need here to make it better for you, or you, the family member, for example, that you're supporting? In using human rights, it doesn't have to cause an argument or make anyone upset. It's about finding solutions. And that's why using this human rights language, it can really make these meetings and these conversations easier. If that doesn't work, then you could raise the issue formally by writing a letter. I'm going to share with you our Know Your Human Rights website that can help you with a sort of letter writing template if you want to write a letter about a human rights issue. And then if you don't get a response, you could follow that up, maybe write to the manager. Then the last one is step up the action. So you can make a complaint, an official complaint through the sort of complaints procedure. You could contact a regulator like the CQC, or you could contact a lawyer if you're still not getting any sort of response or you don't think your problem has been fixed. Now, I went through that very quickly, but this is a really great resource, and that's where a lot of the information today has come from. It's our Learning Disability, Autism and Human Rights resource. The link's here, and you'll get these slides shared with you. And that takes you through a lot of step-by-step flowcharts that take you through the process about finding out if your issue is about human rights, using more of the human rights than we looked at today, and then it's sort of another flowchart which tells you how to raise a human rights issue and all the different things you should do at each stage. I just wanted to give you a few wee top tips. So it's really important to record the impact that the treatment or decision is having on you. The really important thing about human rights is it's, as I've seen a lot about in the chat, it's not about blanket policies or the same thing for same people for lots of people, but it's really about putting the person at the centre of the discussion. What is the treatment having? What's the decision having on you? What's the impact that's having on you? Think about what the person you're talking to might say. Think about what you want to achieve. Are you trying to really change a decision, or can you compromise? What's the sort of minimum that you want? And remember to use human rights language. As I said right at the start, knowledge is power. Learning about your rights. Sometimes whenever you learn about your rights and how they're sort of important to your situation, then it's quite likely that you have more information than the person you're talking to, which is quite a powerful position to be in. And remember always, if the situation is urgent, raise the issue immediately. If one of your absolute human rights, which we've not looked at today, but your right to life or right to be free from inhumane degrading treatment, if they're at risk, then that has to be dealt with urgently. So I'm just going to quickly check the chat, see if there's any big questions. Cool. I think they're all being dealt with. So that's the main sort of stuff that I wanted to say today, but I'm going to share a few of your resources. We've only had an hour and we've tried to deal with 2 rights that are really relevant to people's lives, but there's many more rights and there's lots of stuff to find out about. So I'm going to share some more resources with you. On our website, we have lots of different resources on all sorts of things. Usually we'll send them out. You just have to pay postage, but as you can imagine, none of us are in the office just now. But you can download all these ones for free, and that includes the Learning Disability, Autism and Human Rights one, which is really, really useful and takes you through lots of step-by-step processes. I didn't really touch on much of the changes because of coronavirus, but we've been working really hard at the IHR to get together lots of the information about how our human rights might be affected by coronavirus. I think already some of the things have been shared in the chat, But if you go on our website, which is bihr.org.uk, and you click on that coronavirus button there, that will give you lots of information. This is our website that I mentioned. It's called knowyourhumanrights.co.uk, and this is a really helpful website because it takes you through step-by-step processes. First of all, it tells you about your human rights, more of the human rights than I looked at today. Then it tells you about using your human rights. First of all, you find out, is your issue about human rights? And then if it is, it sort of tells you what you can do, how you can raise human rights issue. So what I'm going to do is leave you with this quote. And because it really gets at the heart of what human rights about for us at BIHR. If you see this woman holding up this massive piece of paper, that woman is Eleanor Roosevelt, and that piece of paper is a Universal Declaration of Human Rights. If you remember way back an hour ago, I told you that Universal Declaration of Human Rights, that was one of the first times that all our human rights were written down and made law. And what she said about human rights is really what human rights means for us. It's not just about courtrooms or countries far away, but it's about everybody's individual life and all the things that matter to us every day. And I'm just going to leave you this quote that Eleanor Roosevelt said. She said, "Where do universal human rights begin? In small places, close to home, so close and so small that they cannot be seen on any maps of the world. Yet they're the world of the individual person, the neighbourhood he lives in, the school or college he attends, the factory, farm or office where he works. Such are the places where every man, woman and child seeks equal justice, equal opportunity, equal dignity without discrimination. Unless these rights have meaning there, they have little meaning anywhere. Without concerted citizen action to uphold them close to home, we shall look in vain for progress in the larger world." So thank you so much for joining us today for this hour-long presentation. It'd be really great if you kept in touch with us. You can follow us on Twitter or Facebook. The links to both are down at the bottom. Feel free to tweet if you've enjoyed this. We always like to see that. There's also a link there to our shop where you can download all of our resources if you want to find out more information about human rights. So thank you so much for inviting us here today, and I really hope that you have learned some sort of tips for bringing up human rights issues in your life. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very, very much, both of you, for working so hard. Can I ask everybody, I know we've all got to go, but rather than clap, can we thank them by doing, and it was good luck you all, and we're gonna, yeah, thank you, fantastic, you were great, you both worked really hard. Yeah, thank you very much. I know that Arlene, you were talking, and Carlin, you were typing, so we really appreciate it. And unless you ask us not to, we're going to email you a copy of the slides when after today. But I wish you all the very best. Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Bye.
everyone. It was nice to meet you.